We continue our conversations with all 17 of the candidates on the ballot for Denver mayor with Trinidad Rodriguez. Welcome to Next. Appreciate you coming in.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So your big idea in this race is to declare a state of emergency on homelessness. And then you've pledged to run your administration out of a field hospital where people would be taken for mental health, drug treatment, shelter, that kind of thing. I'm curious which service providers and public health experts have told you that this field hospital idea is the best approach.
It really goes back to my research, my 25 years of serving in this to tackle homelessness in our community from different vantage points. I have, after I released my plan, my instinct actually turned out to be exactly right, and that is many dozens of people who work on the front lines and in higher level executive positions in our provider ecosystem came out and said this is exactly what we need in our community. They also said, I can't say that publicly because we're part of a coalition of groups that, you know, stays very coordinated on how we talk about policy and plans with the public, but I've gotten that affirmation. But even more importantly than that, I got that affirmation from the loved ones of people who are living on the streets today. So a guy reached out to me through LinkedIn in response to my policy proposal, and he said, this is, one of his 4 kids is living on the streets unhoused in Denver, living a life of drug addiction, and this is exactly what he needs. This is among the first times he's had hope in a very long time for his own child. And if he were still in Denver, he used to live in Denver himself, he would be working to advance my campaign.
Do you understand that some folks might have trouble believing that there are homelessness service providers who endorse your plan if you're keeping their names a secret?
No. No, when you understand how our homelessness, our provider ecosystem works in our community, it's no surprise that there's a large concern about stepping outside of the sort of the core group of you know, singing from the same songbook.
So tell me about this field hospital. Where would it be located? How many people would be taken there? What services would they get?
We haven't determined where it's going to be located yet. It actually is going to be very easy to locate because it's a lot like it's actually a lot like a secured facility. There aren't going to be people coming and going voluntarily. That's the basis and the crux of the involuntary commitment and institutionalization. Our communities used to use institutionalization all the time, and the reason we stopped were not constitutional concerns or legal concerns or particular concerns about rights, because it is the right thing to do when people are of danger to themselves or others. The reason we stopped is because the pharmaceutical industry offered alternatives to institutionalization, which look a lot more efficient for our health systems. But the reality is, things have developed in our society where now we need something like institutionalization again to protect people from themselves and others. And that's really where this started for me. I thought back, I reflected on my 25 years of working in service and observing the nature of the challenge that we're facing today. And I remembered when I was 11 years old when I realized for the first time what it meant that my godfather was homeless with addiction. And what I wished for him was that wherever he is, there would be someone there to protect him from himself or others if he's vulnerable or of harm to himself, potential danger to himself. And that's exactly when I learned about London Breed in San Francisco and the expansion of conservatorship to actually be able to work with people living and dying on the streets of California cities, that was a clear indication that this was a very viable operational approach to helping solve the critical, tragic health needs on our streets.
When you talk about this field hospital, this institutionalization approach, I assume this is going to take a decent amount of space, so it's not going to be in the heart of the city. It's going to be somewhere along the outskirts somewhere? Is that fair to say?
No, I think it can be in the heart of the city. I think we have suitable areas, especially, you know, along this various parts of the Central Platte Valley where this can actually be connected to a lot of our infrastructure and resources. You know, it's got to be heavily staffed too, so it's got to be very easy for our staffers to access.
Well, and heavily securitized, because you're not going to let people leave.
Yeah, exactly.
How many people are you going to inter there, or hold there, or institutionalize there, or whatever term people want to use?
Treat
there.
Yeah, we don't know the answer to that question yet. Of the, you know, roughly 1,500 people who are living on our streets unhoused, It's my sense that, you know, it could be up to certainly, you know, nearing 1,000 people. So yeah, this has to be scalable, and it has to be a trauma-informed design and a trauma-informed treatment.
Let's talk about how people get there and how they get held there.
Yeah.
Who would be going around on the streets to round up the people to take them to this camp?
So my idea is to actually innovate based on our assisted response program and make it a proactive program where we have teams of safety personnel, but also clinicians who can understand whether people are and who can quickly assess whether people are of danger to themselves and others, and whether they likely have a clinically diagnosable mental health or substance use disorder.
So you'd be bringing people in on 3-day holds, I assume, 72-hour holds
Starting,
to start.
yeah.
And then you have to get them a clinical assessment for a 3-month hold.
Correct.
Okay. You'd need a significant number of clicians, I assume,
Yes.
to work at this camp to process people through.
Absolutely.
And the bar for holding somebody for 3 months is really high.
Yes, and it's very high. I have a very high ethical burden anytime we use any type of hold. But the reality is, the part of satisfying that ethical burden is providing a treatment that actually works. And we know the only thing that actually does work in certain mental health and substance use disorders is, in fact, treatment. And so by actually making a viable way for people who are, you know, grappling with severe health challenges, is to actually provide a service, provide an access, provide an entry point for people who are service resistant. Because oftentimes, you know, we know that oftentimes the disorders themselves cause people to resist the services. Very few people want to voluntarily sign up for withdrawal, opioid withdrawal. It's a terrifying thing to face down. But that's where the involuntary hold and the longer-term institutionalization actually helps us. We don't want people to have to go through that withdrawal experience more than once in their lives. Let's do it once, get treatment and healing to happen, and then help people, support people to go on to longer phases of recovery throughout our ecosystem of providers who are offering housing first and permanent supportive housing and everything else, because I'm very much in favor of continuing those programs, continuing support for those programs. We'll just increase the positive outcomes that occur by supporting people who have already achieved, you know, tackling the first health crises.
Do you anticipate that 3-month hold, if the clinician approves it, is at this field hospital, at that camp? Is that where they're held for 3 months?
Yeah, that's my initial thinking, exactly. And as a trauma-informed and trauma-informed design, you know, we have to, we can't design this to be like a jail. We actually want to decrease the triggers that make this a stressful experience for people. You know, I've said, why can't it not, why should we not assume this is going to be like a Betty Ford type setting?
You're talking about a field hospital. Betty Ford's not a field hospital.
No, I understand, but we can build a field hospital however we envision it and however we design it, with whatever objectives and whatever standards that we set. And I am committed to setting an extremely high standard.
How long do you think it would take to stand this up from when you're elected?
My goal and target is within 3 months to have a fully operational program, and then have the ability to scale it over 6-9 months.
So that sounds to me like it's more of kind of like a truly like a temporary, like a field hospital setup, as opposed to like you're constructing a facility.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So you said that you would anticipate maybe 1,000 of the 1,500 people who are unsheltered homeless in the city going into this. What's happening to the other 400, 500 folks?
Well, I think when people who are experiencing, you know, living unhoused on our streets realize that we're very serious about tackling the health challenges that people face using this involuntary commitment process, there is going to be a new, you know, their assessment of their voluntary options is going to change. Their assessment of, you know, whatever options they may pursue, you know, individually, privately themselves away from support services is also going to change. And so it's my expectation that we'll see a precipitous decline in unauthorized encampments and, really people living and dying on our streets in the worst hazards.
So you're talking then about two paths. There's folks who choose voluntarily to go into shelter, avoid one of these sweeps that takes them to the camp, or the people who get involuntarily committed there. It doesn't seem like there's a third path for people who there's no grounds to involuntarily commit them, yet they're not choosing to go into shelter. Are you acknowledging that there are people that you would not have the right to take to your camp?
Yeah, I think that's going to be, there very well could be a very small subset. But we're not talking about a single interaction. I mean, these interactions happen over and over and over again. And the dynamics change for people when, for example, people may not be in crisis but when they first start living on the streets. But we know the traumas they experience can very well drive them into crisis and spur on or ignite actual health crises. So it's a constantly dynamic and evolving situation. These numbers are incredibly theoretical because they ebb and flow as, certainly as the weather changes and so many other factors. So I'm not, I'm answering those questions, but the reality is we're going to be tackling this every single day.
You've said that you want to enlarge the Denver Police Department. Do you know how many more officers?
Yeah, I want to hire 500 more officers in our Denver Police Department, and that's to make our police ranks the size they should be for a city of our size, both in population terms and land area terms.
Could I clarify one thing?
Yeah.
Is it 500 from where we are today, or 500 above the authorized force strength of 1,600?
500 above authorized. And
okay, so 2,100.
Yeah, that would get us to the same ratio of police per 10,000 in population we were at in 1997, which is about 29 per 10,000 residents. Today we're at 19 per 10,000 residents.
Sorry to interrupt you there.
That's okay.
How would you change the way that Denver is policed with that many more police officers?
A fundamental shift in how we police. First of all, we will restore the very valued aspects of policing that actually prevent crime in the first place, and that's through community policing and through programs where police actually build relationships with members of the community. Secondly, we will expand the development of specialized teams. So when we have more personnel, we'll be able to staff up, these innovative programs like jumping off of STAR to going to a more proactive approach rather than just which it's good as it is, rather than just responsive, but a proactive approach. Lastly, it'll actually create capacity for us to train all of our officers even to a higher level, and I do think we have a solid basis for our training today. What is increasingly clear is that the people who don't get enough training are the long-term serving officers who got trained, maybe 10, 15 years ago when they started on the force. And everyone's stretched for time, and we're trying to cover the safety needs of the whole city. By actually having more staffing, we're going to be able to invest the time in deeper training for those seasoned officers, and that's the kind of cultural shift that we need.
Would you envision Denver Police providing the security at your field hospital or a different security force?
I don't think it's Denver Police. We also have to staff up our sheriff's department.
They're under about 40%.
Yeah, exactly, and using very similar tactics. So it could be a combination of sheriff, but also the greatest degree of personnel staffing. The one that I think I'm most focused on is the clinical staffing. And the way we do that is by building innovative partnerships with higher education, not just in Denver, but starting in Denver, because we have innovative higher ed institutions right here, to develop clinicians. This need in our society is not going to go away. Mental health needs are not going to go away. So this is a very wise investment both for our higher ed system, but also for people who are considering how they want to, what careers paths they want to choose. We can offer a very rewarding career where you can have an incredible amount of impact on changing lives by getting into these mental health careers.
Let's talk about the cost of living. You said that in our recent debate, you said that low-income Denverites need to raise their income. I'm sure they appreciate that suggestion. What would you do that is not being done already to raise the incomes of Denverites?
Well, it's really about investing in Denverites' knowledge and skills so that they can actually weather the ups and downs of our economy. You know, I learned from very early on growing up in West Denver that housing can be taken away. So when I had friends whose parents couldn't comply with the terms of their Section 8 vouchers, and they themselves also got evicted in the process, at no fault to my high school friends, you know, that they paid the same price their parents paid, and that disrupted their studies and everything else. So my vision is to actually, for the first time, build a structural organizational relationship between Denver Public Schools and the City of Denver that gives Denver a controlling interest in the Denver Public Schools, so that our city can actually adapt. It's shocking to me that we haven't formalized this much earlier, which is to have both the City of Denver and Denver Public Schools set as their goal creating a city where children thrive. And when we do that, it'll be a city that works for everyone.
Are you talking about mayoral control of DPS?
I'm talking about, yeah, mayoral and city control.
You need the state legislature's approval for
Absolutely,
yeah.
And I will push for this with everything I have. Frankly, the school district is falling far too short in serving our communities of color, and that's been going on for too long. I think there have been a lot of promising and interesting experiments along the way. You know, Mayor Webb had his approach to coordinating with the school district. Hickenlooper had his approach. Hancock had his approach. What I think we need is a single long-term approach that actually puts the needs of our kids at the highest point, and both organizations work to meet those needs. I hear what teachers are saying loud and clear. You can be the best teacher in the world, but if you've got a classroom full of kids who are tackling, you know, trauma in the home, or you know, substance use disorders or mental health disorders, you can be the best teacher in the world, and it's going to be hard to teach kids in that facing those conditions. That's why our city, all of our city departments, and all its sister agencies should be rushing to fill the gaps that exist in those students' lives. This is a game-changing opportunity to actually, you know, put our money where our mouth is, put our vision and our commitment where our mouth is, and that's for our kids.
I mean, Denver already has one of the strongest mayor systems in the country, and you'd be talking about bringing the school under the purview of the mayor as well. That is a tremendous amount of power and control for one man or woman.
Yeah, it is, but I'm not looking to have the mayor's office assume more control. I'm looking for the mayor's office to assume more control so it can share that control for a more effective system of governance. For example, the voter participation in school board elections is far too low for the importance of that governance position. So my vision is that 3 board members will be elected from districts throughout the city, and 4 will be appointed by the governor, by the mayor. But the mayor will rely on the recommendations of a diverse, collaborative group of advisors on those appointments. And those people will be working year-round, every single year, to get engaged with the community and understanding what the next needs are and who are the promising leaders who can actually deliver on those needs. So rather than going from a far too low participation election for 4 of our board members to going to a system that is both thoughtful and strategic and dedicated to community engagement, we're going to get a huge win in terms of better governance and better outcomes for our kids.
This could be an entirely separate whole conversation that perhaps we'll have at some point. I want to leave education and schools there to ask you one final question about something else you've said. That Denverites should live in a city that serves nature.
Yeah.
What does that mean for our cars?
It means that our cars are, frankly, the least efficient way for us to move people around. And as we work to move people more efficiently, it means our cars are going to take literally a back seat to other forms of mobility. And for me, that in my plan and my vision for an equitable mobility system in Denver means having a transit system that is critically built on self-driving technology that will close the gaps in the first and last mile inside our city and connect neighborhoods much more swiftly and efficiently.
How much of that's ready to go now?
I would say it's closer than we think. It's not, I'd probably say, and I've sort of talked to colleagues and friends who are working in self-driving technology companies. I'd say we're within 75% of having something that would work for this situation, because the reality is they're going to be fixed routes, and we can make those investments relatively easier than having self-driving individual cars. So,
scale that to a linear model. How many years away is that if it's 75% of the way there? You know what I'm asking? 'Cause
yeah.
You're asking for a 4-year term.
Yeah.
Are you getting self-driving first mile, last mile within 4 years?
I'm actually asking for an 8-year term, but no more than 8. And
you're agreeing to limit yourself to 2 terms.
I'm willing to limit myself to 2 terms, but I also really only want to do this if I have 2 terms to get this done. So I'm saying 5 years out.
Okay. And then how does the RTD ecosystem fit into that ecosystem then?
Yeah. Well, RTD is well designed as a regional transportation system. And, I was actually shocked to hear someone that said we should rethink the way our regional system is designed, one of the candidates, to de-emphasize our hub model with downtown being at the center. That real estate's all going to be extremely valuable. So the fact that we have this regional infrastructure in place is the kind of thing every city in the U.S. wishes they had. Yeah, it's not operating at optimal level, and particularly when we connect the ability for various modes to leverage upon that regional system, but also when we actually start finally, when we maximize the opportunity to build our city around that framework, the skeleton that the regional system provides. That's going to both drive demand for transit and ridership, and it's going to, and we're going to hit our climate goals faster than we were hoping to.
Trinidad Rodriguez, we will leave it there. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.